So I wanted to share the 1828 definition of American. Before I get into that, living in North America, I see a lot of people saying that they're American, and it's very insulting to those of us who are the descendants of the original American Indians. Uh, the word American applied to the original people of these lands. And because our history has been purposely revised by European colonists and invaders and supremacists, they had the power to usurp somebody else's rightful identity. If you have common sense, you know people of European descent are not really American. But, with me being in Deep South, you see a lot of good old boys, you see a lot of rednecks, whatnot, a lot of patriots or whatnot, and they be telling everybody else to get out of their country. They tell people to get out of their country. These people must have a short memory, very short memory. But I just sit back and I watch these people and their arrogance and their pride and their ego, telling the only people that can tell somebody to get out of this country, this landmass, are the descendants of the original American Indians, which I am. But I see people of European descent telling everybody else to go back home. Well, if they gotta go home, then you, Mr. or Miss European, gotta go back home as well. Some people do things out of ignorance. Some people do things out of hate. Some people do things out of arrogance. Sometimes you don't know which one of three, or might be all three. Sometimes you don't know. But it's inaccurate to call everybody living in America Americans, because they're not. The 1828 definition of the word American, it says it's a native of America, originally applied to the aboriginals or copper-colored races found here by the Europeans, but now applied to the descendants of Europeans born in America. So even though it says, the latter part says that, that's European supremacy for you to have the power to erase and destroy a people and usurp their rightful identity. To change the history books, give us a Eurocentric colonial revisionist history. People say that so-called black people can be racist. Nah, boo-boo. We can't be racist. We can be prejudiced, we can be bigots, but racism entails elaborate systems of oppression. Okay? We're not the ones that are upholding and enforcing those elaborate systems of oppression. Okay? Also, I want to talk about how a lot of people who think they are African American, if they do the genealogy and talk to some of the elders in their family, and they actually do the daggone footwork, the legwork, they will see that their ancestors have been in America for millions of years, even before the so-called Native Americans, who are perpetrating a fraud as the original people of these lands, and they're not, and they know it. So I kind of see them as in the same spot as the European colonists and invaders who invaded these lands in 1492. The European colonists who came over here, forced their way over here, and just took over and set up shop. I'm seeing these assigned Native Americans the same as them. If you're not going to be honest, I see you just the same as them. So, my ancestry on my father's side, we are the Cherokee and Blackfoot tribes. On my mother's side, I'm trying to do the research in the genealogy to get the exact tribes. But what I do know from the research that I have done, that they were the original American Indians in what is now known as Virginia. Particularly in Virginia, there were laws passed by European supremacists that stripped them of their American Indian identity. And it went through this reclassification process, which is paper genocide. The reason why their American Indian identity was stripped from them, because if they were allowed to maintain and identify as their American Indian identity, then certain treaties would have to be honored. And not all of us American Indians are federally recognized. And then I'm starting to wonder who's really on those Indian reservations in America. After learning about $5 Indians and how a lot of Europeans are passing themselves off as Native Americans, and you have a lot of Asians passing themselves off as Native Americans. The Asians are the Mongoloids that crossed over on the Bering Strait to escape the persecution of Genghis Khan. So the ones that we see as the Native Americans, they're not the original people of these lands neither. It is a whole bunch of lies have been told. My ancestors were already here, and one of the consequences for being so welcoming and so friendly to all these different peoples coming here, learning their ways, learning their identity, learning their native tongue and culture, is that these people ended up turning on them. Even these Native Americans now are denying the fact that people who look like me, that we were here first. All right? I am the Aborigine, the original Aborigine of the Americas. Every continent has a distinct so-called Negroid Aboriginal indigenous population. Those of us that have any type of intelligence and honesty know that so-called black people were the first people on the planet. Therefore, we were everywhere. And at one point, all the land masses were connected before the great cataclysm that caused the Atlantic Ocean. If you look at the continents, they fit together like a puzzle piece. So it's not impossible for us to be everywhere on the planet. People want to make it seem like African Americans, so-called African Americans, because that's a misnomer, that our ancestors got here by way of slave boat from Africa. Okay, it's all a bunch of propaganda, and I'm not saying the transatlantic slave trade did not happen. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that it was extorted and blown out of proportion, and we was not given the full truth about the transatlantic slave trade. Okay, we know that Europeans have went throughout the world pillaging, raping, plundering, stealing, and they have a lot of our ancestors' artifacts in their museums. Why did they not preserve any of these slave boats that brought over these millions of Africans from America? Why? And then, you know, because we haven't given them basically a bullshit ass education here in America, what we receive when we go to these schools is a Eurocentric colonial revisionist education, especially the history part. And we have not been taught how to really think. We have not been educated. We've been indoctrinated and brainwashed. So most of us in this country don't know how to critically think. We've been thoroughly corrupted. Too much ego, too much arrogance, too much lower nature, too much dishonesty. People don't have honest conscience. People can't be honest. So my question is, if the United States, and I've already discussed and shared that the United States is a federal corporation owned by foreign interests. It's not even a country. But anyways, if the United States is 239 years old, how was slavery 400 years? How did Europeans kill off 100 million Indians in a 150-year time span? How did Europeans ship 20 million Africans to America in a 150-year time span? Something's not adding up. The math is not adding up. That means somebody's lying somewhere. Somebody's falsifying information, and then these Europeans and their allies that's promoting this European supremacy and these lies, even down to the assigned Native Americans, They're trying to hide the fact that these lands belong to ancient aboriginal so-called black tribes. We were the original American Indians. Most of us from the mound builder civilizations, the Anasazi peoples, the Anasazi Indians, you know, but they're hiding that history, they're hiding that fact, and trying to make us all believe that our ancestors got here by way of slave boat. That's not true. As a matter of fact, the amount of African slaves, the number of African slaves that is said they brought over here, that number was blown way out of proportion. As a matter of fact, when you start doing the research, it appears that most of our people was taken from, most of the American Indians was stolen from the Americas and taken to parts of Europe, taken to parts of Africa. A lot of us were taken from parts of what's known as South America, and brought up here to North America, Central America, all types of stuff. A lot of stuff went down that we're not given the truth about. And we have a lot of people that stand in our way as to just blocking us from a lot of stuff, you know. Like I said, European supremacy and their allies. Even like the Native Americans, they know full well they was not the original people here. Okay? Like I said in the beginning of the video, so-called black people were the original people on the planet. At one point, there were only so-called black people on the planet, and we were everywhere. That means we're the original everything. And we had come from different blood lineages and tribes, and whatever distinct landmass we were in, we developed our own culture, our own customs, our way of life, spirituality, indigenous systems, all that stuff. But after all this crap happened with the Inquisition, especially with the issuance of the, I think it's the 1452 Dum Diversas issued by the Vatican, there are indigenous tribes that's not even on the planet no more because of this Dum Diversas Papal Bull that was issued by the Vatican. And it destroyed indigenous people's way of life. A lot of the descendants lost their knowledge, lost the identity of themselves, lost their heritage, lost their indigenous tongue, everything. That's why a lot of people who are truly the descendants of the American Indians are having such a hard time with this European assimilation and all this European colonial, imperialistic, and capitalistic system we've been given. We're struggling because that's not who we're supposed to be. A lot of people that think they're African Americans, they're not. They're the descendants of the original American Indians. They said the word Indian came from when Christopher Columbus thought he landed in India. That's a lie. Indian, the word Indian comes from it's the root word of indigenous. Okay. Also, another definition of Indi means to be very dark or black. Indi means black. And indigo is the darkest color on the color spectrum. So we're called Indians because we were the indigenous ones. We were the aboriginals of the land. We were the true people of the land. Also, we're also called Indians that come from also Indios. Indios. People of God. We are the people of God. And these Europeans know who we are. Not all Europeans do. Like the people that's at the top, they know who we are. They know what they've done, and they will have to pay for that. They will have to pay for that. I want to talk about this character named Walter Ashby Plecker. See, a lot of Europeans were instrumental in doing some of these horrendous acts of atrocity and genocide, and stripping us from our American Indian identity and washing our brains to make it appear and gives a false narrative like our ancestors came from Africa. So this character named Walter Ashby Plecker, and I hope he burns in hell if there is one, along with all these other people who've done this stuff on purpose to us and is standing in our way. I hope you burn in hell. He was instrumental in removing the American Indian ancestry, and he's also instrumental in the creation of the Racial Integrity Acts in Virginia. As I said before, my maternal lineage, they were the original American Indians in what is now being called Virginia. So with this Racial Integrity Act in Virginia, they removed the identification as Indian and they reclassified the people as black or white. The reason why they did this, not only, before I get into that, what they did was straight paper genocide. The reason why they did this is because if my ancestors were to have their American Indian identity, then these European colonists and invaders had to honor certain treaties. They were so sneaky, they didn't want to do that. Also, they started changing them to false racial categories. Now, when I was doing a genealogy of my mother's side, I see that they were listed as mulatto. Now, mulatto didn't have the same definition as it does now. In modern day times, mulatto means one so-called black parent, one so-called white parent. But before the definition of mulatto changed, it also meant American Indian. They were reclassifying American Indians as mulatto. So doing a genealogy of my mother's side, I see at one point they were listed as mulatto, then mulatto changed to colored, then colored changed to Negro, then Negro changed to black, and now we're known as the African Americans. I saw the transformation as I did the research. I'm like, damn, these Europeans really went to that extent to just strip us of. Yeah. You think they going to heaven? If there is one, nah, they not going to heaven, man. Not for what they've done. And not all of them were responsible. I just want to make that clear, because one thing that's not talked about is European slavery in America. And not all Europeans, you people of European descent in America owned slaves. There was a lot of European slavery. You know, my ancestors were enslaved in their own land. And then to complicate matters, African slavery was superimposed on top of American Indian slavery. And even though I didn't know who I was until I got older and started doing research and digging, and thankfully to other people doing research, when I was in elementary school, I remember reading and learning about the Trail of Tears. That shit broke my heart, and I broke down crying. It hurt me so bad, and I didn't even know why. It's because when I read that as a little girl in elementary school, I was born in the 70s, grew up in the 80s, early 90s. So when I read that in elementary school, the reason why I broke down crying, it was so heartbroken, full of sorrow, is because it triggered a genetic memory. It triggered a genetic memory because that was my ancestor's story. The Trail of Tears was my story, not the transatlantic slave trade. It was the Trail of Tears. That was my ancestor's story. And reading that, it triggered a genetic memory, and I broke down and I cried. Also, like I said, you couldn't differentiate American Indians and Africans. Even though we're not the same bloodline, we're not the same lineage, you could not differentiate us. And in 1920, an ethnologist and military general by the name of Carlos Cuervo Marquez stated that America was a Negro continent. Also, I want to say something about things that, like back in the 1980s, the 1800s, around the late 1800s and even as late as the 1940s, anyone not listed as white was listed as black or Negro. Even a full-blooded American Indian was listed as black or Negro. In Virginia, which is where my mother's people is from, they passed two acts in 1682. that combined American Indians and Africans into one category as Negroes and other slaves. So as I stated before, African slavery was superimposed on top of Indian slavery. So yeah, the word American originally applied to the original people of these lands. It's not somebody of Italian ancestry, Greek ancestry, European ancestry, Asian ancestry. This rightfully belongs to the descendants of the original American Indians, which I am. And things have been purposely done to hide that fact, to hide who were the descendants of the mound builder civilizations, who were the original American Indians, who were the Anasazi people. A lot of lies have been told. A lot of lies have been told. But just to close it out, to repeat, the 1828 definition of American is a native of America, originally applied to the aboriginals or copper-colored races found here by the Europeans, but now applied to the descendants of Europeans born in America. And let me, before I close that out, copper-colored, when you see what we're being told are the Native Americans, they're very pale. They got, some of them look straight up European, or they look Hispanic. These people are amalgamated people. That means they have ancestry from all these different lineages. You just look at the features, look at the hair texture. That's not how we looked. They're hiding how we really looked. And like I said, these ones they look like, some of them even look native. They look European. They look straight up European. And when you listen to what happened about the Dawes Rolls, a lot of Europeans were paying $5 to get their names added to the Dawes Rolls, so that way they can get the benefits, those government benefits. So that's why I asked the question: who are on these Indian reservations? Who are these people perpetrating as Native Americans, or what I like to call assigned natives? Because that's my ancestors' rightful identity. Even though the true descendants went to sleep, we're waking back up, and we're going to claim what's ours as soon as we can undo the European colonization, this madness. And that's all I wanted to say.